Hey everyone, welcome grade 11s. Today, we're jumping into an explainer on a topic that is literally all about you. And honestly, it is perfectly timed for your life and career skills journey. Look, we all know high school can feel like a massive, confusing maze, right? And trying to find yourself in the middle of all these classes, cliques, and expectations, it's confusing, but I promise you it is also totally normal. So think of this explainer as your focused guide to demystifying that exact process, the whole idea of building an identity and figuring out exactly where you fit in.
Okay, before we get into the psychology of it all, I want to hook your attention with a really physical metaphor. Just imagine you've got this massive jigsaw puzzle spread out on the table right in front of you. Now, what happens if you grab a piece and just try to force it into a random spot without ever looking at what's actually printed on the piece itself? Just really picture jamming a random piece into a corner.
Yep, you guessed it. You might totally ruin the picture. You might be able to force it into a space where it technically goes in, but it just doesn't belong there. Or worse, the cardboard bends, the edges start to fray, and the final image is just completely messed up.
Section 1. The puzzle piece problem. Okay, let's dive into this. Basically, your identity is what's printed on your specific puzzle piece, all your unique traits and values. And psychosocial development, well, that's really just the process of figuring out what your piece looks like so you actually know where you belong.
Which brings us to Section 2, Identity versus Role Confusion. We're going to introduce the core psychological friction of your daily lives here. Based on psychologist Erik Erikson's 5th stage of development, this isn't some weird pathology we're talking about. It is a completely universal high school tug-of-war.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how it contrasts two totally different experiences. On one side, we have identity achievement. This is when you have an internal anchor. You've explored your beliefs, tested out your values, and made a firm commitment to who you are. On the opposite side is role confusion. This is that lost feeling. It happens when you haven't quite figured yourself out yet, so you just constantly morph to match whatever crowd or trend happens to be right in front of you. It's basically external drifting, and it leaves you feeling pretty disconnected.
Section 3. The process of exploration.
So how do we get away from that role confusion and actually build that internal anchor? Well, I want you to think back on your lives so far. What are some styles, hobbies, or friend groups you tried on that you eventually realized just weren't you? Maybe it was a highly specific music phase, a weird clothing trend, or a sport you forced yourself to play. Look, I want to completely validate that experience for a second. Identity isn't just something you're born with. Failing to fit into a certain group isn't a social failure. It's a successful data point. It's literal scientific evidence helping you cross things off the list, which brings you one step closer to figuring out who you truly are.
Let's move to the next point and see how this builds, because you are all currently navigating a much bigger macro journey here. It really happens in 3 distinct steps. Step 1 is that individual exploration we just talked about, testing the waters. Step 2 is solidifying your values, which is all about securing your foundation. And finally, Step 3 is fitting into society, entering the wider world with absolute confidence.
Section 4. Finding your inner anchor. All right, shift your focus inward for a second. Imagine if your high school, your favorite clothes, your hobbies, and your current friend group literally all vanish tomorrow. Crazy, I know, but what fundamental parts of you would remain exactly the same? Those things that stick around, those are your core values. Things like honesty, creativity, loyalty, or independence. I'm just firing these off, so mentally grab the ones that really resonate with you. These core values act as an unbreakable anchor. They ensure your identity doesn't just shatter when your environment changes, like say when you graduate or move to a whole new city. The scenery around you changes, but your anchor holds firm.
Section 5. Fitting into the world. So zooming back out to the macro level, the crucial point is this. How does having this anchored identity actually help you? Well, it makes the honestly terrifying tasks of your future, like choosing a career path, finding a community, or building a relationship, significantly easier to navigate. Because when you know your identity, you don't just passively look at the world and ask, who do you want me to be? You're not shape-shifting anymore. Instead, knowing your inner self lets you actively ask, where can the real me contribute the most value? You go from being a passive observer of society to an active participant on your very own terms.
Section 6. The 2 circles strategy. Let's look at a quick mental model to help visualize how your internal identity and your external life interact on a daily basis.
And this brilliantly illustrates the whole concept. We call it the 2 circles. Imagine a small circle sitting inside a larger one. The outer circle represents the roles society simply hands to you: student, child, citizen, maybe employee. You don't always get a choice about those, right? But that inner circle,
Those are the empowering adjectives you actively choose for yourself: resilient, artistic, analytic, empathetic. It's the difference between what's expected of you and who you actually are.
Bringing it all home, healthy psychosocial development basically boils down to this. It happens when your inner circle is what guides how you play the roles in your outer circle. Finding your fit happens when your internal values dictate your external roles, not the other way around. If you've decided you are creative on the inside, that fundamentally changes how you act as a student on the outside. When those two finally align, that is the exact moment you've found your fit.
Which leaves us with this provocative final thought to take with you. Tomorrow morning, when you walk into the busy hallways of your high school, how will your inner circle dictate your outer roles? Think about it. You are the one holding your puzzle piece, and now you know exactly how to read what's on it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay anchored out there, and I'll catch you next time.